So we're diving into something that seems like it's everywhere right now. Hustle culture.
Yeah.
Especially, I think, with, remote work.
Right.
It's kind of blurring the lines between, like, when do we work?
Totally.
When is personal life? And we're supposed to be, like, crushing it 24/7, but also we're supposed to have perfect work-life balance.
Right. How's that work?
And something's got to give. And you know what I think takes the hit a lot?
What's that?
Our mental health.
Yeah.
I mean, burnout rates are, like, seriously through the roof.
Oh, yeah.
They've gone up something like 30% since the rise of remote work.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy. So in this deep dive, we're going to kind of unpack all of this.
Okay.
We're going to look at, how do we safeguard our mental well-being when there's all this pressure to hustle all the time? What is this whole digital detox thing really about?
Yeah, good question.
And how do we actually thrive, not just survive, in this new world of remote work?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it, how we've created this whole culture around, like, almost worshiping overwork. Like, it's a badge of honor to be exhausted all the time.
Right.
But you're right, the impact on our mental health is a real thing.
Yeah.
It's very real.
Yeah, it really is. And it's like you said, we're on this treadmill and it just never stops.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
the moment you even think about slowing down, you feel guilty.
Oh, I know.
Like, I should be doing more.
Absolutely.
But I'm kind of curious, like, where did this whole hustle culture thing even come from?
Well, I think at its core, it's this kind of relentless pursuit of achievement. Often at the expense of personal well-being. Yeah. It's like the whole rise and grind mentality that you see everywhere, all over social media.
Right.
You see everyone showcasing all their successes and their side hustles and their perfectly curated lives.
Yeah.
It just creates this illusion that everyone else is operating at, like 110% all the time.
Yeah, and it makes you feel like, if you're not doing that, then you're falling behind.
Right, exactly.
And I think what's really important for all of us to kind of remember, I guess, is that what we see online is oftentimes like a carefully constructed facade.
Oh, for sure.
It's not the whole picture.
Totally.
So before we kind of get too deep into that, though, how can we recognize if we're starting to buy into this too much? Like if we're heading towards burnout, like what are some red flags?
Well, I think there are definitely some signs to watch out for.
Okay.
Chronic fatigue is a big one. And I don't mean just feeling tired. It's this persistent exhaustion that doesn't go away even after a good night's sleep.
Oh, okay.
And then there's like increased irritability. You're snapping at your partner, getting frustrated at little things, road rage, things that wouldn't have bothered you before are suddenly just setting you off.
Right.
And then finally, and this is a tough one, I think, for a lot of people to admit too, but you might notice that you're losing interest in things that you used to love. Okay. Including work.
So it's not just like I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's starting to actually impact my enjoyment, my passion for things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hitting home. Okay, so let's get practical then.
Okay.
How do we protect ourselves from kind of going down that path?
Well, one of the most powerful things you can do is learn to set boundaries.
Okay.
And this means getting comfortable saying no to things.
Okay.
To things that spread you too thin, and really prioritize your tasks. And I don't just mean work stuff. This goes for your personal life too.
Okay.
Maybe it means setting a hard stop to your workday. No emails after 7 p.m. no matter what. Or being more selective about the social commitments that you say yes to.
So, like, are you picturing somebody who's, always on call, always checking their phone, never really disconnecting? Is that, like, what you're talking about?
Absolutely. I think that constant connectivity is a huge part of the problem. But setting boundaries is just one piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
Another essential strategy is to schedule regular breaks throughout your day.
Okay.
And I don't just mean grabbing a coffee and, scrolling through your phone. I mean really intentional breaks that allow your mind to truly disconnect and recharge.
So not the always on mentality.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Any techniques that you recommend?
Have you ever heard of the Pomodoro technique?
I have.
Okay, so that's where you work in these focused bursts, say 25 minutes.
Okay.
Followed by a short break. And this can really help prevent mental fatigue. And it actually boosts productivity.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Even simple things like stepping away from your desk to have a proper lunch break.
Okay.
Or going for a quick walk can make a huge difference.
I'm hearing a lot of intentionality in these strategies. It's
Uh-huh.
not just about doing less, it's about being more mindful about how we use our time and energy.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's about shifting from constantly doing to consciously being. And this leads us to another really powerful practice: gratitude and reflection.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Yeah, so in the whirlwind of hustle culture, it's easy to get so caught up in what we haven't achieved yet.
Right.
What's still on our to-do list, the next goal we have to conquer. Gratitude and reflection help us to just pause, take a breath, and appreciate how far we've already come. Yeah.
So instead of always looking at what's next, it's like, celebrating those wins along the way, no matter how small they are.
Exactly. Yeah, it could be as simple as, taking 5 minutes at the end of each day to jot down 3 things you're grateful for or reflect on a recent accomplishment. It sounds really simple, but it's so powerful for rewiring our brains to focus on the positive and counteract that feeling of never enough.
I love that. It's like a mental reset button to just remind us that we're actually doing okay.
Right.
And sometimes that's all we need to hear. What about, what are mental health professionals saying about this whole thing?
Well, I actually spoke with a therapist recently who specializes in burnout.
Okay.
And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, "We've glorified busyness to the point where it's become a status symbol. But the truth is, it's a recipe for disaster, both for our individual well-being and for society as a whole."
Wow, that's a powerful statement. It's not just individual stress then, it's like a bigger cultural issue.
Right.
Yeah, we're all caught up in this frenzy.
Exactly.
Which brings us to another piece of this whole puzzle, I think, which is our relationship with technology.
Right.
And this whole idea of a digital detox.
Yeah.
Have you ever done one?
I have, yeah. What about you?
I've dabbled,
Okay.
but I will admit it is hard
It is.
to fully disconnect these days. We're so reliant on our devices for everything.
Yeah.
Work, communication, entertainment, all of it. But it's like we're constantly plugged in.
Right.
And it's exhausting. So I'm curious, how bad is this digital overload really? And what can we actually do about it?
Well, the numbers are pretty startling.
Okay.
The average adult spends 7 hours a day staring at screens.
7 hours.
7 hours.
Oh my gosh. I think I might even beat that.
Really?
I think so.
Wow.
That's a little scary.
Yeah. That's like a third of our lives, basically.
Yeah, right.
And it's not just the time that we're spending online. It's the constant bombardment of information and stimulation that our brains have to process.
No wonder we're feeling fried. So what happens when we're constantly plugged in like that? What are the signs that we're, pushing things too far?
Well, you might notice physical things like eye strain, headaches.
Okay.
But the real danger, I think, is the impact on our mental and emotional well-being. Digital overload can lead to sleep disturbances, anxiety, difficulty concentrating, and even depression. It's like our brains are constantly on high alert, never getting a chance to truly rest and recharge.
So we've established that digital overload is a real problem.
Yeah.
But what can we do about it? It's almost impossible to completely disconnect these days, right?
Yeah, you're right. I don't think it's about going off the grid entirely. It's about finding a healthy balance.
Okay.
And reclaiming some control over our tech habits. And that's where the idea of a digital detox comes in.
Okay.
It's really about consciously choosing to disconnect from our devices for set periods of time. And it can take different forms.
So it's almost like a technology cleanse. What does that look like practically?
Well, it could be as simple as creating tech-free zones in your home.
Okay.
So maybe your bedroom becomes a sanctuary where phones and laptops are strictly forbidden.
Okay.
Or maybe it's committing to having tech-free dinners with your family. Or putting your phone away an hour before bed to give your brain a chance to wind down.
I've heard that the blue light from our devices can interfere with sleep. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Our devices emit blue light, and this suppresses the production of melatonin, which is the hormone that helps regulate our sleep-wake cycle.
Okay.
So using your phone or your laptop right before bed can make it harder to fall asleep.
So creating those tech-free zones and setting those boundaries around our devices could actually really help us sleep better.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And even small changes can make a big impact. You don't have to go cold turkey. Start with something manageable, like 30 minutes of tech-free time before bed.
Okay.
And gradually increase it from there.
It's about finding what works for you and building those habits slowly.
Exactly.
But, isn't it ironic that we're talking about using technology to disconnect from technology,
Right.
like using apps and things?
It's a little bit ironic, but there are actually some great apps out there that can help us manage our screen time and develop healthier tech habits. Things like Freedom or Forest can block distracting websites and apps
Oh,
during certain times, and some even use gamification to motivate you to stay off your phone.
that's actually pretty smart.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay, so I'm curious. Have you heard any real-life stories from people who have, like, actually benefited from doing a digital detox?
Oh, yeah, definitely. In
Right.
fact, I connected with a listener recently who shared their experience with a digital detox. And they were feeling so overwhelmed by the constant notifications and the pressure to be online all the time.
Yeah.
So they decided to do a weekend digital detox.
Wow, a whole weekend.
A whole weekend.
Yeah.
Completely disconnecting from all devices.
Wow, that's commitment.
Right. But the results were incredible. They said they felt like this huge weight had been lifted.
Oh, wow.
They were able to be fully present with their family, enjoy nature, rediscover hobbies they had neglected. They even said they slept better than they had in years.
That's inspiring. It shows that, like, disconnecting even for a short period can have, like, profound benefits.
Right.
So we've talked about hustle culture, we've talked about digital overload, but I think, these two things often go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Especially now with the rise of remote work, it's this always-on work culture colliding with the always-on nature of technology.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's playing out in our home offices and on our couches and just everywhere.
You've hit the nail on the head. I think remote work has been a game changer for so many people, offering flexibility and autonomy. But it's also blurred the lines between our professional and personal lives
Yeah.
in ways that, honestly, I think we're only beginning to understand.
So how do we navigate this new world of remote work
Yeah.
and find that, like, elusive balance between productivity and, well-being?
Right.
It's like we're pioneers in uncharted territory.
We're all figuring this out as we go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like any pioneers, we need the right tools and strategies to thrive in this new environment.
Right. Right. Yeah.
One of the most important things, I think, when you're working remotely is to create a dedicated workspace.
So no more working from bed in our pajamas.
It's tempting.
I've been guilty of that.
I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even if it's just a corner of a room, having a designated area that's solely for work, I think it helps create that psychological separation
Okay.
between your professional and personal life. It's like a signal to your brain, okay, it's work time now. And then when you're done, you can physically leave that space and transition into relaxation mode.
Yeah, it's like creating a commute, even if it's just from the bedroom to the living room.
Exactly, yeah.
I can see how that would be helpful.
And speaking of routines, I think establishing a structured workday is really crucial.
Okay.
Set clear start and end times, just like you would if you were going into an office. This helps prevent work from bleeding into all hours of the day and night.
Yeah, that's something I think a lot of people struggle with.
It is.
It's so easy to just check emails all the time
Oh, yeah.
when your office is, right there.
It's a real challenge, and that's why setting those boundaries is so important.
Right.
Communicate those boundaries to your colleagues and your clients.
Yeah.
Let them know you're not available 24/7.
Okay.
You have a right to disconnect and recharge.
It's about protecting your time and mental space. And speaking of connecting, how do we combat those feelings of isolation that can sometimes creep in when you're working remotely?
Yeah.
Because I've definitely felt that like, missing out on those social interactions you'd normally get in an office.
That's a really common concern I hear from remote workers,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something you have to be very intentional about.
Okay.
Make an effort to, schedule those virtual coffee breaks or team lunches just to chat and connect with colleagues. And it doesn't have to be all about work.
Okay.
Outside of work, prioritize connecting with friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
Make plans, go out, nurture those relationships.
It's like we have to be more proactive about creating those social interactions.
Yeah,
and we're
that's-
not physically in the same space.
Right, exactly. And don't forget the importance of movement. It's so easy to become sedentary when you're working from home. Make sure you're getting up and moving throughout the day.
Yeah.
Take breaks to stretch, go for walks, maybe even fit in a quick workout.
Yeah, those little things, they all add up.
They do.
So we're talking about, a dedicated workspace, a routine, prioritizing social connection, and movement. It sounds like a holistic approach.
It is. It's about recognizing that our physical and mental and social well-being are all interconnected.
And being intentional about creating that environment that supports all of those.
Exactly.
And, I think it's always helpful to hear from people who are like actually living and breathing this remote world.
Oh, for sure.
We had a remote work expert on the show recently.
Oh, boy.
And they shared some really fantastic tips. And one of the things they emphasized was like the importance of setting clear expectations with your team, being proactive about communication, and like finding ways to create that sense of community even when you're not physically together.
That makes sense, yeah.
I think, that clear communication and a strong sense of community can really make a huge difference.
Absolutely. It's about finding ways to like bridge that physical distance.
Yeah.
And create a virtual work environment that feels supportive.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about, the downsides of hustle culture, the importance of digital detoxes, and now like the unique challenges and opportunities of remote work.
It is a lot, but I think the overarching theme here is really about balance. Finding that sweet spot between like striving for our goals,
right,
and taking care of our well-being.
It's a constant balancing act, that's for sure.
It is.
And something we really have to work at, especially these days.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't just happen. It's about making those conscious choices each day that align with our values and priorities.
And I think also being kind to ourselves along the way, recognizing that we're all a work in progress. There's going to be days when we feel more balanced than others.
Oh, yeah. Self-compassion is huge.
Yeah, we're often our own worst critics, I think.
Totally.
Okay, let's take a moment to recap what we've kind of learned so far.
Okay.
We started by talking about how hustle culture can impact our mental health.
Yeah.
And how setting boundaries, taking breaks, practicing gratitude can all help us protect ourselves.
Right.
Then we explored the concept of a digital detox. And we acknowledged like those detrimental effects of being constantly connected.
Right.
And talked about some practical strategies to kind of reclaim our time and attention.
Exactly.
And then finally, we delved into the world of remote work.
Yeah.
And highlighted both the challenges and the opportunities there. We talked about the importance of a dedicated workspace, a routine, prioritizing those social connections, and incorporating movement.
Yeah.
And throughout it all, we've really emphasized mindfulness, intentionality, and self-care.
It's really about being aware of our needs and making those conscious choices to support our well-being.
Absolutely. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. And it's about celebrating those small wins.
I love that.
Along the way.
Exactly. And remember, even those small changes can make a big difference. You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight.
Right.
Start with 1 or 2 habits.
Yeah.
And see how they make you feel.
It's about taking those small steps consistently and building from there.
Exactly.
And, I think it's important to remember you're not alone in this. We all face these challenges.
Right.
And it's a process of figuring out what works best for each of us.
That's a great reminder. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
Navigating this crazy world.
Yeah.
And it's okay to ask for help.
Right.
Lean on each other.
And celebrate the wins.
Exactly.
Right.
Is everything.
Yeah.
And remember, taking care of your mental health, it's not selfish. It's an act of self-love.
Beautifully said. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what's one final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
That's a good question. I would just encourage everyone to really take a moment to reflect on their own definition of balance. What does that look and feel like for you? And what are some steps you can take, starting today to create more of that in your life?
That's a powerful question.
Yeah.
And I think a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into hustle culture, digital detox, and, really the art of thriving in this remote work world.
Yeah.
Remember, your well-being matters. Take care of yourselves out there. And, as we wrap up, I want to echo that you are not alone in this.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear from you.
Oh, yeah.
What resonated most with you?
Right,
what are your own strategies for staying balanced in this kind of crazy world that we live in?
Right.
Share your thoughts and tips, your aha moments with us on social media using #MindfulHustle.
It's amazing what we can learn from each other.
Yeah.
Creating a more balanced and fulfilling life isn't a solo mission.
I agree.
It's an ongoing conversation.
It really is. And it's, it's constantly evolving, right?
It is.
What works today might need tweaking tomorrow.
Totally.
As our lives change, priorities shift.
Exactly. We need to stay flexible, adaptable, and most importantly, kind to ourselves through it all.
Yeah. That self-compassion piece is huge.
Always.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of never doing enough.
I know.
Especially when we're surrounded by these messages all the time about, productivity and achievement.
It's like we're always striving for this mythical state of perfect balance.
Right.
Which probably doesn't exist.
So true. Maybe it's more about, finding a rhythm that works for us and acknowledging that there will be ups and downs along the way.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. It's a dance, not a destination.
Yeah. And sometimes we stumble or, step on our partner's toes.
Right.
But the music keeps playing and we keep moving.
We adjust, we learn, we grow.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
We unpack the pressures of hustle culture.
Yep.
Explore the power of digital detoxes.
Right.
And navigated the sometimes choppy waters of remote work.
It's a lot.
It is.
But through it all, we've really emphasized that taking care of yourself, prioritizing your well-being, that's not a luxury. It's essential. It's the foundation for everything else.
It really is. So as we close out this deep dive, I'd love to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
We've talked about balance, boundaries, intentionality, but what does that actually look like in your life right here, right now?
Yeah.
What one small step can you take today to move closer to that vision of balance?
Maybe it's setting aside 15 minutes for a tech-free walk, scheduling a virtual coffee date with a colleague, or just taking a few deep breaths and acknowledging how far you've come.
I love that. Whatever it is, just remember that you have the power to choose.
You do.
You have the power to create a life that feels good.
A life that is both fulfilling and sustainable.
And you don't have to do it all at once.
Right.
Small steps, consistently taken, can lead to really remarkable transformations.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It is fun.
We hope you found it insightful, inspiring, and maybe even a little bit life-changing.
Yeah.
Until next time, be well, stay mindful, and keep striving for that beautiful balance that allows you to truly thrive.